The narcissist thought they won until this happened. And I want to begin with the specific psychology this title is pointing at, because the winning the narcissist thought they achieved and the this that dismantled it are both worth examining with the precision that makes the examination genuinely useful rather than simply satisfying. The narcissist's sense of having won is not the same as the ordinary human experience of winning something. It is not the satisfaction of a goal achieved through genuine effort and genuine merit. It is something more specifically organized around the supply economics of the dynamic and the narrative control that the construction requires to maintain its stability. The winning the narcissist experiences is the specific construction-confirming sense that the dynamic produced the outcome the construction needed, that the relationship ended in a way that preserved the narrative, that the person who was harmed was sufficiently discredited or diminished or departed in a way that served the construction's account of events, that the supply landscape has been successfully navigated toward a more favorable arrangement. That specific sense of having won is what this episode is about dismantling, not through vindictive satisfaction, but through the honest examination of what actually happens when this arrives. Let's establish what the winning felt like from the narcissist's side, because understanding the specific quality of the construction sense of victory is what makes this most legible. The construction sense of victory is organized around several specific features that together constitute what the narcissist experiences as having come out of the dynamic in the stronger position. The narrative was preserved. The story of what happened and who was responsible for how it ended was successfully shaped in the direction the construction required. The supply landscape was successfully transitioned. The loss of the former source was addressed by the acquisition of new supply with sufficient efficiency that the gap was not acutely felt for long. The person who was harmed appeared, from whatever distance the narcissist was monitoring from, to be the one who was more visibly affected by the ending, the one whose life showed more disruption, more difficulty, more evidence of the cost of the relationship's conclusion. And the narcissist, observing all of this from the position the narrative had constructed, experienced something that the construction registered as confirmation of its own adequacy, as the supply economics equivalent of having been right, of having been the one who managed the situation most effectively, of having come out ahead. This sense of victory is real in the sense that the construction genuinely experiences it. It is also entirely dependent on a specific set of conditions remaining stable, conditions that the this of the title is the beginning of the end of. And the conditions are more fragile than the construction's confidence in them suggests, because the winning was always assessed against a snapshot, against the specific moment in the dynamic's aftermath when the new supply was at its freshest and the former supply appeared most disrupted and the narrative was most recently assembled and most coherently maintained. The winning was assessed against the conditions of the immediate aftermath, and the immediate aftermath is not the full story. The first component of this is time. Not time as a passive healer in the vague sense that most people mean when they say, time heals. Time as the specific, active, relentlessly honest revealer of what was actually built versus what was simply maintained with sufficient urgency in the acute period. Time is the this that the narcissist's sense of victory was least prepared for. Because the construction's victory was assembled in the acute period when the construction's resources were fully mobilized around managing the transition. And across time, with the acute period's urgency subsiding, the management requires less resource, but the landscape it was managing has changed in ways the construction's acute period assessment did not fully account for. What time reveals is the specific progressive insufficiency of what the construction assembled as its victory, the new supply that felt like the confirmation of the construction's continued attractiveness moves through its own cycle. The freshness declines. The supply quality that the early phase generated begins its inevitable reduction, and the specific non-fungible thing that the lost relationship provided, the thing we have discussed across multiple previous conversations, the actual self-reaching quality of the genuinely perceptive partner's presence. That thing is not present in the new arrangement, and its absence becomes more specifically felt as the new arrangement's early phase supply quality declines. The narrative that felt coherent in the acute period begins showing the specific strain of being maintained against accumulating evidence that it does not fully account for. The former partner's visible disruption, which was part of the winning's confirmation, resolves, and what resolves into is the second component of the this. The second component is your visible thriving. And visible thriving in this context means something more specific than simply appearing to be doing well. It means the specific, genuine, unperformed quality of someone who has been doing the work that the relationship's ending made available, the return to self, the development of genuine clarity, the building of something real in the space the dynamic was occupying. This visible thriving is this that most directly and most specifically dismantles the construction's sense of victory, because the construction's winning was partly assessed against the prediction that the former partner would be more durably affected by the ending than the narcissist, that the disruption would persist, that the loss of the relationship would produce a trajectory that confirmed the narcissist's narrative about who was more dependent, more affected, more organized around the relationship's continuation. Your thriving contradicts this prediction with a specificity and a visibility that the construction's narrative cannot easily absorb, not because you designed your thriving to contradict it, because genuine thriving, organized around your own genuine investment in your own actual life, produces the specific evidence that the winning's assessment was wrong in its most foundational prediction. And the monitoring that the construction maintains, registering the evidence of your thriving with the continuous accuracy of a system that has been tracking you since before the ending, delivers the contradiction to the construction's assessment with a consistency and a specificity that the narrative's management mechanisms must work increasingly hard to process without acknowledging what the contradiction is revealing. The third component of the this, and the one that operates most deeply in the narcissist's interior rather than in the observable behavioral landscape, is the specific accumulating quality of the private moments in the period after the winning's acute confirmation has subsided. We have discussed the 3 a.m. quality in previous conversations. What it produces in the specific context of a winning that has begun to show its limitations is something more specifically organized than the general private distress of the unmanaged hours. It is the specific, uncomfortable, increasingly difficult to root away from conscious experience awareness that what was won was the narrative's version of the outcome rather than the outcome itself. That the construction came out ahead in the account that was assembled for public and social consumption, and that the actual self carrying what it always carries in the unmanaged hours, knows the difference between the account and the reality, knows what was actually lost, knows what the winning cost in the specific currency that the construction's victory assessment was not denominated in, and what that knowing produces, and the specific ways the construction responds to it, and what it ultimately means for the person who's thriving is the this that the narcissist's winning was never fully prepared for. That is exactly where we are going next. What the knowing produces in the narcissist, who has begun to sense that the winning was the narrative's version rather than the actual outcome, is a specific and recognizable sequence of interior experiences that the construction's management mechanisms are increasingly less able to route away from conscious awareness as time continues its honest work. The first interior experience is the one that arrives most quietly, and that the construction is initially most successful at managing. It is the specific, low-level, background quality of something not quite resolved that persists underneath the new arrangement's surface functioning. The new relationship is producing supply, the social presentation is intact, the narrative is being maintained with sufficient consistency that the people in the narcissist's social world are receiving it without visible challenge. And underneath all of this in the specific private quality of the narcissist's experience when the supply is not actively engaged and the social presentation is temporarily suspended. Something is present that the winning's acute confirmation was supposed to have resolved and has not. The something is the actual account, the accurate version of what happened that the constructed narrative was assembled to replace. And the actual account, carried in the actual self's territory where the construction's management cannot fully reach, has a specific weight that the narrative does not have. The narrative is maintained through effort. The actual account simply is. And in the unmanaged moments, the isness of the actual account becomes more specifically present than the effort-maintained narrative can successfully cover. The second interior experience arrives when the monitoring registers the evidence of your thriving with sufficient consistency that the narrative's management of the contradiction becomes acutely resource-consuming. The monitoring has been delivering the evidence. Your life, genuinely invested in, genuinely building, genuinely organized around your own actual self, rather than around the dynamic that was consuming it, is producing the specific quality of visible, genuine thriving that we discussed in the first part of this episode. And the construction which assembled the winning partly against the prediction that you would be more durably disrupted is now processing the consistent evidence that the prediction was wrong. The processing of this evidence does not produce the clean, organized, consciously acknowledged revision of the winning's assessment that genuine self-awareness would produce. It produces something more diffuse and more specifically uncomfortable, a quality of the private moments that is organized, without the narcissist being able to fully identify what it is organized around the specific gap between what the winning claimed and what the evidence is demonstrating. The gap is not consciously named, but it is present, and its presence has the specific weight of something that is true pressing against something that is maintained. What the construction does with this weight is predictable and worth naming clearly, because the predictability is itself useful information. The construction's response to the accumulating weight of the actual account pressing against the maintained narrative is the same response it has always deployed when uncomfortable interior experience requires management. It generates supply with increased urgency. The social activity increases. The new relationship's early phase quality is extended through increased investment. The public-facing life is displayed with the specific, slightly overperformed quality we have discussed in previous conversations. All of this is the management system doing what management systems do when the thing being managed is requiring more resources to manage, applying more of the available management tools with more intensity. And the overperformance, if you are close enough to observe it, is itself the most honest behavioral evidence available of what is happening underneath it. The winning that was genuinely secure would not require this level of performance to maintain. Genuine security does not perform itself. Only the maintenance of something that is not as secure as the performance suggests requires the specific quality of effort that the overperformance carries. The effort is the tell. Now here is what all of this means for you. The person whose thriving is the this that the narcissist's winning was never fully prepared for. And this is the most important part of what this episode can offer, because the most useful thing is not the satisfaction of knowing the winning is being dismantled. The most useful thing is understanding your own role in the dismantling accurately. Your thriving is not aimed at the narcissist. That is the most important thing to hold clearly. If your thriving is aimed at the narcissist, organized around demonstrating something to the monitoring, constructed to contradict the winning's narrative, performed for the audience of the construction's assessment, then it is not thriving. It is the continuation of the dynamic by other means. The dynamic is still organizing your behavior. The narcissist is still the primary reference point. The construction is still the thing you are responding to, even when the response is demonstration rather than compliance. Genuine thriving is not aimed at anyone. It is the natural consequence of genuinely investing in your own life, your own clarity, your own returning to yourself. It produces the visible quality that contradicts the winning's assessment, not because you directed it to contradict anything, but because genuine people, genuinely investing in genuine lives, produce something that is specifically different from the disrupted, dynamic organized behavior the winning's prediction was based on. The contradiction is the byproduct of the genuineness, not the goal. And this distinction matters more than anything else this episode can offer, because the person who is aiming their thriving at the narcissist is still organized around the narcissist, is still in the dynamic, however transformed the dynamic surface expression, is still giving the construction the organizing centrality in their life that the dynamic always required, and is therefore not actually thriving, is performing thriving for an audience that the genuine version of the same activity would have completely stopped performing for. The narcissist thought they won. This that dismantles the winning is not something you do. It is something you become when you have genuinely stopped organizing your life around the dynamic. When the monitoring's existence is something you know about without being organized around. When the winning's narrative is something you are aware of without requiring its revision to be confirmed for your own clarity to be real. When your life is genuinely, completely, without performance or demonstration, your own, that becoming is the this, and it is the most complete and the most permanent dismantling of the winning that is available. Not because it is aimed at the winning, because it is not aimed at the winning at all, because you are simply, genuinely, fully elsewhere, in your own life, doing your own work, building your own actual things, and the narcissist's winning, encountering someone who has genuinely stopped being organized around the dynamic, finds nothing to win against. The winning requires a contest. Your genuine absence from the contest is the most complete ending of the winning that exists. Not dramatic, not aimed, simply real. And real, in the specific way your genuine thriving produces it, is the most powerful this available.